And we are live, Wall Street Pitch, for episode 41 of The Baptized Machine.
Baptized Machine, baby.
You were way off there. Very excited. We're going to get right into it tonight.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
I can't really
you're good. I think the headphones might be a little screwed up, but
I'm so excited for this.
Yeah, we got Rob Loggia. The fans have been demanding the return. He's going to come on the show. It looks as Buck Turgidson.
No, he might not want you to say that.
Well, that's what his name is on here.
Oh.
Yeah. Hello, Rob.
Rob. Or I guess Buck.
Or Buck Turgidson. How are you doing?
All right. You guys are really, really quiet, so just give me 1 second.
Oh, no worries.
Is it on our end or?
All right, see if that helps.
Can you hear us better now, Rob?
Yeah, I got you now.
All right, right on, man.
Awesome. Good to see you, man. It's been, what, 3 to 4 years?
Yeah.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. Lots happened, huh?
Yeah, I'm glad to see you're still smoking. Keep up those healthy habits. Yes.
Honestly, our episodes with you, I think, were some of the most listened to back in the day. So people are excited for this one.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wonder why.
So, how have you been? What's new in your neck of the woods? Last time we talked to you, COVID had just started, I think.
And you were working as with John McAfee as one of his. I think you were like a campaign advisor at the time. And also, I'm sorry for your loss for a dear friend of yours. I know, so I want to just acknowledge that.
It's been that long, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I guess for those of you viewers that may not know, it's worth filling them in. In the interim, John was arrested in Spain and then held there in their jail. Forgive me if I'm a little raspy and low energy. I'm just getting over something, so I didn't want to cancel with you guys, but I'm not going to lie. I'm not 100%.
No worries.
No worries. We appreciate you coming on, Rob.
Yeah, we can keep this short if you need. Just let us know.
Man, you are still really low.
Oh, really? Can you hear me now?
Just turned our mics up, so maybe that'll help.
You're loud and clear.
Okay.
Oh, have I been really low this whole time?
Wow, that's much.
Yeah,
Okay.
now I hear myself.
I turned you up, yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Shit,
Okay.
I hope the previous episode wasn't ruined.
And now we're all here.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to start with just, continue with the line of thought you were just on?
Just letting your audience know. So John was arrested in Spain on open warrants from the United States, which is interesting, given that as short as when he was in the Bahamas, not long before that, the U.S. Embassy wasn't interested in him at all. In fact, when he was picked up by the Dominican authorities, they wouldn't even send somebody over to arrest him, let alone get him out of jail there. So a very strange situation, how he was picked up, that he was picked up.
Interesting.
I think everybody involved has their suspicions and a great deal of public speculation as to his ultimate fate. Those of us that care about him are given to believe that he's not with us anymore. But again, very little clarity on the reason why and what happened there. The Spanish government is essentially a criminal operation. So, there's not a lot of information forthcoming.
Yeah,
interesting.
I did see. Well, I guess to just go back, there's a lot of speculation online of whether he was, quote unquote, Epsteined and got murdered by the prison security, or if he actually committed suicide. I wonder what your take on that is. I know this is a hard thing to talk about, probably. So come on. I just ask people to use their brains. He was a man who was a fighter, and in his last conversation with his wife, I think his last words were, "I'll talk to you later, sweetheart," or something to that effect. People mention aspects of his personality that suggest that he would cheat the hangman, and I do not deny that. I confirm it. He absolutely would. But he would only do so when he believed that his options had run out. I knew him well enough to know that, and I think his his whole career basically stands as evidence of that. He never gave up anything until it was done. So the idea that after the first hearing, when no appeals had been tried at all, and when his entire legal team was busy preparing those appeals, that John thought it was the time to exit this world. It makes no sense.
Yeah.
So I don't offer an alternative explanation. I wasn't there. I don't know what happened. I tend not to trust the word of liars. So people that have shown that they have no difficulty lying, and the Spanish government and their officials certainly fit that definition. So I'm not going to believe their story either, especially given the shady way in which they handled it. So we don't know what happened. We just know that John isn't here. Were he alive, as some people are suggesting, it certainly is strange for him to be just quiet. I certainly never knew him to be this quiet. In fact, I'm surprised his ghost hasn't visited me. Additional evidence against the afterlife, because I feel like if there's anybody, he would have found a way to at least flicker a light bulb or do something.
Yeah.
So let's go back. You said there weren't warrants for his arrest, and they sort of came out of nowhere when he got to Spain. What are we missing here?
Yeah, no, he left on the heels of notifications of charges here. Now, as far as I was aware, most of those were civil. Brought by agencies, yes, but civil nonetheless. I believe there was some criminal charges in New York State, but that would have been a state issue. What happened was, and when he was after he left the Bahamas, he went hopping around the Caribbean, ended up in Cuba for a while. But a couple of the islands there received visits as he looked for a place to stay. So one of them was the Dominican Republic. And the Dominican Republic picked him up basically on immigration charges. It was their own charges. They weren't enforcing any warrants. But basically, when he pulled in, he had a gun. A visitor. He had a boat full of guns and, money that they considered to be unexplained, even though it was his. And basically undertook to arrest him. Now, at the time, obviously people were trying to get him out of that. So calls were put into the United States Embassy, letting them know that John McAfee is in custody in the Dominican Republic. And they told him the exact location, the facility that he was at, and that they did not feel it was a lawful arrest, and would the embassy intervene on his behalf. Now, we have extradition treaties with the Dominican Republic. Had they had enforceable warrants and simply walked across the street with them, they could have had John McAfee then, before he even arrived in Spain. And so it remains a question to me to this day as to why they did not do that. John eventually did get out of there, but it was with the help of the British Embassy. He has dual citizenship. And so a call was put into them. In fact, I was the one that spoke to them and said, listen, a citizen of yours is being detained. Can you get somebody down there? And I mean, with the feedback that I got, I wasn't there. I was in the States, but people were keeping me apprised of what was happening. And their response couldn't have been faster. They got over there like greased lightning and basically said, you're letting our citizen go. And John hadn't lived in the UK, in however many years, ever. So for them to do that, I think is extraordinary.
Wow.
But they did so. And the United States Embassy, a place that he had called his home most of his life, including for the last 10 years, didn't go get him out, but more importantly, apparently didn't have any warrants that they wished to enforce at that time.
They had no warrants that they wished to. Wow. Okay.
Well, if they did, you explain to me why they simply wouldn't walk and enforce them, because,
Right.
all this trouble of supposedly looking would have been saved had we, this alley cat that has adopted me. It doesn't make any sense. I have to assume that there were no warrants. I know how the government operates. If they existed, they would have had their officials over there like yesterday. I mean, talk about somebody else doing your work for you. So the whole story is very strange.
Yeah.
Wow, this is interesting. So I've heard some theories about why they might have, the real reason they were after him, having to do with spyware on government computers, and I've heard a bunch of stuff. Do you have any insight into maybe the story behind the story? Why was he, such a person of interest for a few different governments, it seems?
Well, not just governments. Yeah, I mean there was no they. There were many theys.
Right.
Many different parties, and I think that's one of the ways that we hurt ourselves when we're trying to understand the world around us. And we simplify things into dichotomies, and those dichotomies are creations of our own imagination. We say one or the other, but not both, and certainly not five things. In John's case, this isn't a matter of saying we knew who hated him. He had made a lot of enemies over the years. He was a very bold and charismatic person. He was not shy about his opinions, and he was self-actualized. He didn't look to others to see what he should do and then jump to that. He did what he was going to do, and he said what he was doing, whether or not people liked it. Now, if you have that attitude, you would invariably accumulate enemies. Furthermore, he had taken it upon himself when he was in Belize to expose corruption that he believed that he saw. This corruption included, some people who don't play, and that's the cartels. They were after him for a long time, and they don't tend to forget things. So already we have extra legal and legal organizations all gunning for him. The United States, he embarrassed on untold occasions. You can just go back and look for his name in the headlines, and you can count those, and you'll see the number of times he created an embarrassment for our government, either shaming them for pathetically behind the times cybersecurity portions that they take, or whatever it was, or basically explaining to them how to do their jobs. Furthermore, he was a champion of freedom and liberty. I don't need to tell you the way that's looked at in official circles these days.
Yeah.
The whole sense of things has been to move us to this new world where those things don't exist. To build back better, they call it, I think. So people like John aren't welcome in it, and in fact present a real problem for people who want to do that kind of thing, because they need everybody. The utopians need everybody, and therefore if you don't fit that bill, and you're not towing the line, and you're not on board with this world that they have envisioned, this perfect little place where everything's nice, you're a problem. Period. End of story. And I say that non-conspiratorially. You don't need people in a room gathered. You only need one person to look across the table and see that guy as a problem. And now you have one person who's activated. Well, John, you can multiply this however many times due to his popularity and his notoriety and everything else you want to say. And you do the math. He had a number of guns pointed in his direction. And to wait till somebody's vulnerable, well, that's the time to strike.
Do you think
that cartels and other governments can't get inside of Spanish jails? Then I have news for you.
Yeah, they definitely can. Do you think there's anyone in the current political or pop culture landscape right now who could kind of potentially fill the shoes of John McAfee and is fighting for similar things on the same level as him right now?
They're too busy fighting each other, and I'm not sure that what can be done. Part of my silence has been more or less coming to that conclusion that there is very little that can actually be done for so many of the things that are problems. And nobody, it seems, even the people I agree with on things, want to go back to the sort of poisonous roots and figure out what those are, discuss them, address them, and reach any sort of a reasonable state of affairs or conclusion. They would rather distract themselves with the money-making and attention-getting things that we see in the headlines that have nothing to do with the root cause of the problem. It would be as if you had a nest under your home and were just spending your time stamping out insects rather than going after the nest. And that's a metaphor for basically everything at this point. We have huge, enormous problems that, require almost a simplicity in understanding what's really going on. And that was one of the things that John brought to the table. He could simplify things in a way that people could begin to understand we're doing the wrong thing here. We're looking at this wrong. He very much did not like to tell people how to think, and neither do I, but he tried to equip them with the tools and the insights that they would
require to go through that process themselves. And that's not happening. You have people right now who a year ago were united in lockstep on the subject of COVID and, the Build Back Better agenda, which I'm now told was a conspiracy theory, even though I watched it happen in real time and I saw people saying the things that they said. I don't know what you do with that, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I don't think that any of these people can fill it in. Now they're fighting with each other over Palestine and Israel, a country far away from where most of them are. I'm not even aware of any of these people having family there. Maybe some of them do. You can understand their interest a little more then, but this fucking shit has nothing to do with them. And go on Twitter and look, they're fucking, they can't shut up about it.
Yeah.
And so people that were calling each other heroes a year ago are calling each other names that, not nice names over this subject that really doesn't impact them at all. And I'm not saying it's not terrible, but nobody over there has clean hands. So why the fuck are you going to get drawn into taking sides? These people have hated each other for a long fucking time. What don't you get?
Yeah. That's a good point. And it's causing so much division in our own country as well.
It's an old technique. I don't remember if we talked about it on here, but I feel like maybe we did. They did this back in the Industrial Revolution in the 1830s. A lot of the factory owners recognized that the poor Irish and the poor immigrants that were in the cities were starting to talk to some of the free blacks. And this was mainly in northern cities. In the South, the blacks did not have their freedom yet, so it wasn't an issue. But in the North, they did, and they could compete for jobs. And they worked for the same factories that poor immigrants coming over would find themselves working in. And these guys started talking and saying, gee, it kind of seems like we're all getting screwed by the same people. Maybe that isn't so great. And maybe we should, get together on that. And before you know it, people were descending on these mostly Irish neighborhoods and mostly black neighborhoods with placards and signs made to look out as if they were made by themselves. So in the Irish neighborhood, you had signs that had slogans that would be recognizable to the Irish.
Interesting.
So it looks like they were the ones putting them up. And what these signs did was basically say how the other group, in the case of the poor Irish, it was the blacks, were stealing their jobs. In the case of the blacks, they said the Irish are stealing your jobs, okay, and turned them against each other. Now, the reason that we know all of this and we know it wasn't the communities themselves putting up the signs is because a lot of times have passed and people have died. We have their memoirs. We have the paper. We know what they did. We know that it happened. These factory owners sent people into these neighborhoods with these sign bills. Now, this is the 1830s. We're generations over generations of sophistication stand between now and then, and they had thought of this then. So why people think that they simply just stopped with a formula that worked and rather than improve upon it, which is what I suspect.
Yeah, they perfected it.
Yeah, perfected it. And this is what they do to us now. So when they see that people are starting to get on and starting to talk to each other and starting to put aside smaller differences in favor of the more important ones, somehow something happens. And there's something much more important that comes up for them to argue about. And it happens every fucking time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I feel like our culture now is becoming so addicted to it. The identity politics is just embedded, and we have both sides taking things out of context, making up ridiculous stories, and for a massive range of topics, and just absolutely going all out on the internet, in person, whatever it may be. Oh, and yeah. I don't know how you get out of that, especially with social media where everyone can post their opinion. It's scary.
Everyone. Now think about what that means. Think about the stupidest person you ever met. And I'm not one of those people who think that people that disagree with me are necessarily stupid. There are some very intelligent people who I don't agree with.
Yeah.
However, I've also encountered and met and intimately dealt with stupid people. I know they exist. So I'm not going to be gaslighted into believing that there are no people whose intelligence is simply not such that they should be participating in certain discussions. They can have their opinion, and I believe that everybody is entitled to be the king of one domain, and that's what happens to them. So they can, no, I'm not saying that their lives should be managed because they're stupid. They shouldn't.
They should be free to make their own decisions and mistakes, as the case probably would be. But the decision for these people to voice their opinion is not a very good one, and there's really no check you can put into place on it. So what we have is the full ugliness of Vox Populi being shown to all. Just go on Twitter and spend some time, and don't spend some time with the top line. Dig into the comments beneath these top line, because the top line people, they're all clout chasers. We know what they're doing. Look at some of the people responding to them if you want to get a sense of what I'm talking about.
Yep. Oh yeah. It's messy.
So what do you do with them? I mean, you can't gas them. That was tried, and I'm being facetious, but it comes down to that point that we're stuck in this world with these people, and there doesn't seem to be any way to treat with them. Not only stupid, but another category of people is the chronically intellectually dishonest, and they'll simply just lie, and you can't treat with somebody like that either. And I see a whole bunch of people who I may agree with ideologically stupidly falling into that trap. Thinking if there's any way that can be, you can have any sort of discourse with people who have demonstrated time and again that they don't want to operate on a fair ground. Yeah,
and that's something I've really been noticing recently. Even if ideologically I'm totally on board with someone, I see people all the time just stooping to that level, and that just makes it impossible to communicate, compromise, and for anything to get done, honestly.
Sure.
So, and who knows what this country will look like in 5-10 years, but I feel like whatever's going on social media is accelerating, exacerbating all of this. And maybe in the end, it will be the answer with...
Well, we're on the cusp of some great changes that really modify the calculus tremendously. And I would suggest one of the things that I'm working on now, we'll see if I ever get around to publishing it, but it's a piece on what we're doing to ourselves with certain technologies. I've come out recently writing about AI and how I don't think it's a good thing. But one of the things that we're doing is we're actually reversing the trend of knowledge and knowability. And these technologies are what really is responsible for creating the state of affairs. So if you look at history, we come up to a point where, what can we see and what can we believe? And for the longest time, this corpus of information was becoming larger. And when we first had the telegraph, well, now we could instantly bring news from one community to another, where before we'd have to send somebody on horseback. And for most things, why bother? So, this information flow was very slow and the world was very small. And now, for years, what has happened is that's increased. And then the invention of the camera and the invention of, the microphone and all of these things, the video camera. Wow. Now our evidentiary body has increased tenfold. I mean, look at all of the things that we can bring to bear. You can't say this didn't happen because I have a photograph. And now we have this greater ability to grapple with the world that we face ourselves with. Well, this trend has reversed, and AI is on the cusp of taking it all away, as we can now produce a picture out of thin air. We can produce a video out of thin air. That never happened, but it looks real. Now what do you do? And it's not a matter of simply looking at the picture that was AI generated. I will give it to you in a pile of half real and half generated, and now you sort them out. And so can I, sitting here as a thinking person, accept a photograph as evidence in a discussion now? Can I accept a video as evidence that something happened? I find that I can't, increasingly, as these things become more and more realistic. I can't even read something and accept that a person wrote it. So we've moved backwards in our expansion of an ability, the ability of an individual to get a grasp on what's happening around them. And it almost seems like every opinion, somebody asks you to comment on something, you're asking me to comment on things. I almost have to preface everything with if, and I find myself doing it all the time now. Well, if that's true, I think this, but you're not going to come back later and play some fucking game on me because this turned out not to be true. I have to almost acknowledge up front that, listen, if that's true, I think this, but if it's not true, you're not going to hold me responsible for it not being true. all my resources to determine these things have been taken away. What can I do? I can guess. I can maybe look at the person that's telling me and evaluate their honesty, but that only goes so far. Perhaps they were lied to, but they really believe it. So they're being honest with me, but they're wrong. I'm left nowhere. You figure it all out.
That's literally terrifying. So how does this compound? I mean, right now we're definitely on the cusp. It's starting to bleed into our news cycles. Even I've seen some fake videos go around. But what does that mean when there is no truth anymore, and everyone creates their own truth? Is that the ultimate form of division where we're honestly just sort of fucked, and there's no coming back from that? Or
the implications are staggering.
Right.
The implications are staggering. You do a podcast, and by accident, maybe one day you say something that really gets somebody's goat, and you become very unpopular. Let's just say with the people who right now have authority, and they decide, well, we're going to do this guy in, and they show evidence to the world in video form that you did some things that you did not do. How do you prove that you didn't do them? What is your recourse? You go to court now, and what? The evidence for your guilt can be manufactured by the people who would be presenting it anyway. I don't see a way past that situation, except everybody's going to have to each time hold their nose and pretend that they know what the answer is. Some would argue that this is what we've done for a long time anyway, so maybe very little changes. You talk about the veracity of information. Go back to the 1900s, small, tight-knit, largely Christian community. Okay, and there's a scion of the community. He has his family. They built the church. They run the factory that keeps the whole town going. And the son blows his brains all over the fucking kitchen wall with a shotgun. Now, that's a disgrace and a shame in that period of time. And that's something that they wouldn't want the community to know. Well, the sheriff, his salary is paid too by the scion. So he comes in and he says, well, you know what? We'll just make all this go away. He had a farming accident. And we're going to do this out of consideration for your service to the community.
Interesting.
That's the story that's going to go out. And now I ask you 100 years later, what happened? What's the truth? If you go down at the town hall and look at the records, they're going to say you had a combine accident. If you look at the news reports from that time period, they're all going to say combine accident. Okay, that's not what happened. So you tell me now about absolute truth, relative truth. What's true there? What's the story? I know people who will say that the truth is that he fell into a combine, and you'll never get me to agree to that.
Yeah.
Whether or not I can prove it.
It's just going to become so much easier. I mean, the gears are just greased. But I'm curious if there'll be some kind of institutions or organizations that will form for the sole purpose of identifying what's real or not. But how do you trust them? You can't.
Just take photographs. You're going to depend on some sort of algorithmic residue, remaining behind in that photograph. And as these technologies get better, one of the things that's happening is this algorithmic residue is disappearing. And they're not there yet with video, but with photographs, we're pretty much at the point where even the AIs themselves can't tell the real article from the fake. So, I don't know what you do with that. I don't have the answer.
Interesting.
Sticking our heads in the sand certainly isn't the answer. Being aware of it so that at least we know where we're standing can help us all to some extent.
That's a start. So speaking of truth and all that, John McAfee did fake his death once, and then
sort of,
right? Like to escape prison. The story's a little fuzzy for me, but then that documentary came out about him like a year or two ago, where one of his girlfriends was sitting on a beach and said she saw him recently after he was pronounced dead in Spain. So how do we tell if that's true or not? Even just going back to that,
she must be lying.
Yeah,
I mean, people say things for different reasons.
Yeah,
I happen to know who that woman is, and people who know her history really don't pay much attention to to something.
Oh, really?
The entire documentary was a bit of a joke. I mean, the thrust of it was that he was a selfish man, and they had this ridiculous person who seemed to know nothing, but they put him on for half of the documentary. The author.
Yeah.
And his story seemed to be that John was this horrible, selfish man. But if you watch the footage throughout the entire thing, all you can hear you hear a bunch of people around him concerned for their own safety and comfort and well-being and nothing else. And you hear John concerned for their safety and well-being and not his own.
That's true.
Go watch it. I'm not telling you to take my word. Go watch it again with what I just said in your mind, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Whoever put it together, it was a poor job if you were trying to make John look like a selfish man, because all he was doing the whole time was making sure that other people were comfortable and letting them know that there might be danger and giving them an opportunity to leave. That's all we saw.
And his whole life he was painted as something he wasn't. I mean, I was just thinking this, the couple times we spoke with him, he was the most amazing, nicest guy.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone who knows him says the exact same thing. And going back to what Hans was saying earlier, can anyone take his place? Honestly, I think he is one of those people that's one in a million or one in a billion. And there will never be someone like him again, and I wish more people knew him and he was sort of memorialized in a different way. But going back to his death quickly, I know you talked about the circumstances were suspicious. Weren't there other circumstances afterwards with his body that were strange? I know his wife was having trouble getting his autopsy. Is that stuff true?
Well, right, considering it took 3 years to get his body, an unheard of state of affairs, even in Spain. I'd say it was strange. Yeah, they would not release his body for 3 years. When they did, it quickly became apparent that his wife, who wanted to have their own autopsy done, wouldn't be able to do that. And the reason is that they simply didn't refrigerate the body for something like 6 months.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what you do with that. By itself, it doesn't prove anything. But taken all together, that's all awfully. So really, this one high-profile case is the one you completely botched every single thing on? It's like the Epstein case. Really, the cameras that had worked for 10 years in that jail failed that night. All of them?
Yeah. Yeah.
But what's scarier, that or the fact that there are people walking the earth with us right now, maybe next to you in traffic, that believe it because they have to. They have to believe it. They can't live in a world where that's not true, where that's not a coincidence, because it would be too terrible for them.
Is his wife thinking about suing, or I know she's still actively investigating this. Is she making any headway, or do you know anything about that?
No, I don't have any information. I think at this point she's looking to try and move on. When you reach dead end after dead end, there's only so much that can be done. That being said, I'm working with a group right now called the John McAfee Foundation, and Janice is involved with that as well. Mm-hmm. And we hope to try and uncover what we can. I personally don't hold out much hope. I'm a bit of a cynic, but when it comes to these things, I'm a big believer that you strike when the iron's hot, or you will lose too much. You give people time. Time is what makes everything go away. And now they can look, instead of you, for the odds and ends. They're in a better position to find them, and they can make those odds and ends go away. Now, if there's anything left to be found, it's going to be in the form of people. And before they'll talk, you have to flip them and convince them that it's worth the danger that they're going to create for themselves and the people close to them. And not many people are going to want to do that.
Have you had any people come after you due to your affiliation with John?
Oh, I've been targeted, sure. Yeah.
By who?
What's that?
By who?
Mainly individuals, just angry people with, that didn't like him. No official
no official interest or anything like that. Nobody that looked like they were sent by somebody, let's put it that way. Small potatoes, but still distressing. I have a family, and I may have opinions people don't like, or I may have had friends that people don't like, but that's no excuse to try and cause me grief. So, I hope something bad happens to them. I don't know what else to say. Society that tells me I can't take care of that myself, so I can't go and deal with it. We just have to be vigilant and make sure that I'm in safe surroundings, at all times as best as I can. And then hope that they're crossing the street to get their mail and a car hits them, because then that solves the problem for me.
Where are you right now? It looks like you might get hit by a car.
What's that?
Your background, it looks like you might get hit by a car right now.
You like that? That's actually all generated by a shader.
Okay, cool.
Code completely generating the scene. I didn't make it. I'm not going to take credit for it, but I fool around with them in my spare time, and that's one of the neat ones, I thought. For those who don't know, it can be hard to get, shaders are difficult. You're building a picture, pixel by pixel, but each time you draw a pixel, it doesn't know anything about the rest of the picture. So the math itself has to say what belongs there. So it can be very challenging, and whoever did this did a lot of work to make that actually look like what you see, which is cars going down the street. It's neat.
Interesting. That's cool. That's cool. So what have you been working on for the last year? I know you still write, and you're working with the John McAfee Foundation. Anything else you're working on? Anything new on your plate that you want to talk about?
Nothing that I'm ready to release information about. I am working on some software.
Cool.
Programming, yeah. But the primary thing occupying my attention right now has been AI, and that's only it sort of assumed an importance with me because of the importance and the rapid rate that it has assumed in our society.
Yeah, let's talk about AI. I'm curious.
Yeah.
So, the average person, and myself included, really has no idea of the potential or power. I've messed around with ChatGPT, but what is our world going to look like in 10 years if the AI keeps developing at the pace we're on right now?
Well, one of the problems in discussing this is that AI means so many things, and it means different things to people, and it means different things within the actual field itself. So, what's under discussion and scrutiny a lot right now is the LLMs. Those are learning models, and there are people within the industry who argue that that's not even real AI.
I've heard that.
So is this a acquittal of the technology, meaning that it's therefore benign because it's not technically speaking AI? Absolutely not. So LLMs present their own challenges. Some of them we just talked about. This whole difficulty of evidentiary handling, and being able to look at something and say whether or not it is true. These AIs are gonna make that almost impossible, and that's not science fiction. That's on the trajectory that we're on right now, and we can experience in real time. It's not something that you need to take my word for or say, wow, he's really speculating here. You can go and see the results of what they're making now. And so again, in videos, they're not quite there. Toys R Us recently released a video that got some attention because it was creepy as hell.
Toys R Us?
Yeah, Toys R Us. They want to bring back the brand, and this was one of the ways they were going to do it. And if you go online and search Toys R Us AI commercial, you'll see. And it's horrible what they made. It's these disfigured toys and just really bad. And you're watching it and you're like, I don't even know who I am right now watching this. This is fucking So video, there are challenges. It's a hard medium for to master this art with. And I think they're going to need a lot more learning before they get where they need to go. But
so it's not replacing Hollywood anytime soon. Like,
I'm not sure if it ever is. I'm not sure if it ever is. Everything by definition that an AI produces is going to be derivative. And I've seen criticism that certainly has reasonable basis where much of what the studios have been producing has been derivative. And in one sense, you can't blame them. These are guaranteed money makers.
and it works. But the difference is that when people get tired of it, the studios can go back to creating original works, and the AIs are still confined to derivative works. Everything that they come up with is always going to have a derivative element because of how it's designed. It trains on materials and then derives new materials based on it. So I don't know that it's going to be able to satisfy our need for quality entertainment, such as it is indeed.
And so AI has many different definitions. How close are we to creating a type of AI that actually has, I don't want to call it consciousness, but the ability to create original ideas and thought on par with a human's? So
it's an interesting. I'm not convinced we ever do create it.
Okay? Really? Okay.
My feeling is, and I don't claim original credit for this. I indirectly came to the idea through Douglas Adams. I don't know if you've heard of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So he was the author there, and in his book he described these supercomputers, and they were the job of the supercomputer was given was to come up with the answer to everything, the life, the universe, and everything. And the first computer that they built came back after a very long time and said, "I can't do it. It's too hard. However, I can build the computer that will do it." And so those capabilities were present in this first generation computer. Even though it couldn't conceive of the answer, it could conceive of how to build something that could find the answer.
I like that.
So what I see happening is that we're going to build machines that ultimately build the machines that are problematic. And these algorithms that we're doing now, they're already writing software that we don't understand. Okay, the people who are making these things have come out on the record and said they're writing code that we don't understand.
That's insane.
Right?
That's terrifying. I mean, that's sort of mirrors like human evolution in a sense. Like, well, I don't know what I'm saying here, but creating something smarter than yourself in order to, to continue on the line.
I just go out and fuck then. I mean, I don't know why people have to build ridiculous things. Go get
laid.
Right?
Yeah, true.
True.
We need a McAfee's sex machine that he was building.
Those were great. Those were great.
Sex-powered cars.
I get it, but on the same token, these technologies are so scary when you really dig into them that forget about the horror stories. You start looking at the purported benefits and you start finding, cracks in the armor there where, this isn't so great of a benefit. So they talk about coding, and one of the things they're looking to do is have coding. And now they've just done a study where they have equipped some coders with AI, and they found that when they were quizzed afterwards on the subject matter, they didn't understand it. This is why teachers always would tell you to show your work. They wanted to know that you actually understood what it was you were doing.
Oh, okay? Interesting.
Yeah,
and this is not happening. So that what I call this in my discussions with people is the GPS effect. And think about people that and what happened when they start relying on the GPS, they lose their sense of direction. And now they don't understand even how to read a map because they haven't. This is what's happening with this benefit of saving people time. So
our whole generation is like that. Sort of like the calculator. People,
and it's already problematic. What does that tell you 1 or 2 generations in when we're not even dealing anymore with programmers who are transitioning into this? We're dealing with people who have never done programming because they haven't had to.
They don't even know what an HTML code looks like.
Wow.
Yeah.
And we just slowly lose the ability. Does quantum computing tie into this at all? Because I've heard once quantum computers are invented, Bitcoin will be hacked and it will go to zero, like that kind of stuff.
It's a different problem set. I don't think that the two
totally different
crossover. Yeah.
I see.
Quantum computers are very good for some things and pretty much worthless for everything else.
Okay.
And those things that they're good at are very interesting to certain subsets of people, but it's not going to be the same type of revolutionary thing that this is. And for years, people were talking about it as if it was. And it's an interesting problem space, but it's not at all threatening in the same way. The thing about technology is that problems such as quantum computing might cause can be routed around. They're going to find new ways to secure blockchains. Everybody talks about the quantum computer cracking the traditional computing blockchain. What they don't talk about is quantum solutions to securing a blockchain. So if you have the one, you can have the other.
True.
We'll move on to that. I don't see that as the same type of a threat. This is something uniquely different. And it's, again, not just one area. These LLMs are just one small part of this entire sort of research field. How about robots, drones? Now imagine some of these things with any measure of consciousness, or more importantly, autonomy built into them. I don't want one of them showing up on my doorstep. I don't want to deal with that shit. In Star Wars, why do you think even a poor farm boy had a robot deactivator? I mean, I think it's funny that the people who made that saw the types of things they were needed. I think they went about it non-politically, and they designed what made sense to them. And of course that made sense to them. You wouldn't have these potentially dangerous machines around without a way to deactivate them. And everybody would have, it would be vitally important to any society that wanted to coexist in any way with a robot. The thing about a robot is he's your friend today, and pretty much every science fiction universe has dealt with these problems in one way or another. If the universe features robots where they can be reprogrammed and pointed towards somebody else's ends, and that was your friend 5 minutes ago, and now he's working against you. So everybody had an activator. We have nothing like that. If a police robot shows up tomorrow, because its programming run awry, I didn't do nothing wrong, but it's here and it thinks I'm the bad guy, what can I do? I keep taking shots at it and maybe hit something vital, but chances are I'm just going to hit its armor and the thing's going to keep coming. And this is the world we're entering. Yeah.
So do you genuinely see a robotic police force, a robotic military, like all that kind of stuff?
Go read the headlines from the last year. You'll find, I don't need to believe it. They already said that they have these things. Yeah. Look at what Boston Dynamics is doing. This is not science fiction anymore, is my point. Yeah.
Wow. And are there any other areas of threat? I know you talked about, the ability to create fake pictures, videos, all that good stuff. I'm assuming it's going to wipe out most of our jobs unless we adapt. Is there anything else that this is going to do to us?
The scariest thing about it, and people say, well, we won't connect them to important things. The internet's already connected to important things. Okay, our fucking water supply is internet connected. All right, so that's not an answer. The biggest concern for me is that many of the people that are working in this field, looking at their social media posts, other residue, books that they've written and such, they're utilitarians. And I submit, I said in a recent article that I wrote, that the last thing that you want to do is to allow any super intelligent entity to have utilitarian ethics seep into its programming. And it really, the people that are making these things, it seems likely that that's going to happen.
So what does that look like? Is that like the Meta AI machine or language model? How it when you gave it the scenario whether to misgender someone or let a nuke drop, it would say let the nuke drop. Is that where
that's a reflection of somebody's ethics that have been programmed in? Yes. What I mean by utilitarian ethics is more the sense that if trying to decide between good and evil, this thing's going to do a head count, okay? And it's going to say this many people are hurt, this many people aren't. And so, you can justify unspeakable evil with that kind of logic. Utilitarianism is a popular philosophy. It's not a very nice one, and it's not one that I would suggest people subscribe to. Now, a number of years ago, it didn't come from this guy, but it came from this guy. It was the fruits of his work, even though he didn't come up with the theories. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. A number of years ago, people were talking about, if they go back in history, would they kill baby Hitler? And it was this whole big discussion on the internet. Everybody wanted to know, was it okay to go kill baby Hitler? And for me, that was a little bit stupid. I understand, why people don't like him, and I get it. But there would be no Hitler without Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And there would be not a lot of other things. Now, I know you can't kill an idea, but maybe getting rid of him would buy us a little time before some other knucklehead came up with some of the garbage that he wrote. The man was a menace and a blight, and so many of the bad thought systems that we subscribe to, they come from him. He was the father of the French Revolution, and we see how that
really.
Yeah, a real menace. So his ideas are finding their way into these things. This is when you define freedom as, well, you should be free to make only the right choices. That's a Rousseau concept. He was one of the first people on record in Western history to pervert the word freedom in such a way. Before Rousseau, everybody understood it to mean what a normal person should understand it to mean: unfettered, free, not being harassed or molested, and not being imposed upon.
Right.
So defined it differently, and that's the definition that's taken with a large subset of thinkers, especially in the modern age.
Interesting. And I didn't know that Hitler was inspired by this philosophy.
Well, he may never have read it in his life, but his ideas are not possible without Rousseau's ideas, is my point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to start following this AI stuff a little bit closer because it's fascinating. And I mean, now the government is thinking about putting restrictions on it, and there's the whole war between like Elon's way of thinking versus OpenAI's way of thinking. Does any of that even matter in the big picture? Yeah.
No, and I think governments are starting to realize the dangers to themselves. Obviously, I don't believe they care much about us, but they do care about themselves. And so they're scrambling to try and figure out how they can legislate these things. Unfortunately, this isn't an area where legislation is going to work at all. It rarely does with problems of this general kind to begin with, but in this particular case, definitely not. No legislation in country A can do anything about country B. Even world agreements will be broken by intelligence agencies. We already know in advance that that's the case. So world agreements won't be worth the paper that they're written on. If you stop your research in a particular country, all you're doing is increasing your vulnerability for the research that they're doing over there to come being used to crush you. So that's not an option. You can't stall development on something when you're the only one doing it. Or when one group is the only one doing it, you will immediately find yourself at a disadvantage against the people that won't stop.
So even if you're
sports, because once one person starts using it, the pressure is on everybody else to use it.
So what you're saying is basically, if we stop and China gets 6 months ahead of us, they'll be ahead of us forever.
Well, maybe not. Maybe we can pull ahead. Who knows? But that's all academic. My point is it's the wrong way around the barn.
I see.
I do believe legislation is needed, but nothing like the type of legislation we see. The legislation we need needs to empower human beings, individuals, against machines, and it very much needs to be framed in that way. Any help we're going to get from legislation is going to be, for example, if a robot is deployed in the public space, if I feel the need to destroy it, that person can't come after me for property damage. If he didn't want his robot damaged, he should have kept it in his own private area. And that's the type of legislation that would actually help us. It would empower individuals to fight back against these things. One of the things that I'm working on is the idea of how to poison these LLMs, and to start trying to popularize that idea. And one thing that we know is that when they're fed back their own output, things start going really hinky. So what I would encourage people to do is to look into the feasibility of creating entire web farms of AI output of, all kinds of things, images, documents, or whatever, and then opening it up to allow the scrapers in and saying, sure, yeah, come in, scrape my area, and get all the information to train your AI. Because if they do, they're going to poison their AIs and make them worse. Now, I would doubt that our intelligence services are far behind my thinking on it. And this is probably already going on, but they're not doing it to ours. They're going to do it to the Chinese, or they're going to do it to the Russians. And so there's probably all of these fake documents out there in Russian trying to mistrain their AIs. A new Cold War, if you will. But not on our behalf. It's the part that I would like to see.
Do you think this ties into, I know this is totally out of left field, but do you think any of this ties into the UFO phenomenon at all? Super advanced technology.
No idea. I can speculate, but I don't have that information. I don't know.
Do you think it's gonna?
And if I did, I would get my hand around his neck and squeeze based on everything I heard. So.
Do you think it's gonna impact the 2024 presidential election? AI. I mean, we see some of like the whatever Biden called them cheap fake videos and all that, but like beyond,
I think those were real though.
I think they were real too. But beyond that, do you think it'll have any actual impact rather than like a funny meme or something?
It's hard to say, except in that there are potentially, if you look at the idea of remote voting and ways to impersonate genuine remote voters, AIs could be brought to bear to automate some of that process. So, obviously an AI can't show up at a voting booth, but we have a lot of remote voting situations that they might be able to influence. There. And to me, old-fashioned corruption is far more dangerous than anything AI is going to do in that space. Problems with elections go back a long time, all the way back to the beginning of this country. In our case, a lot of people, you've heard of Tammany Hall, correct?
Yeah, wait, that sounds really familiar.
The political machine in New York, Tammany Hall. Yep, familiar with that.
Most people are familiar with the Tammany Hall under Boss Tweed in the mid to late 1800s.
Robber Baron age.
Basically, right. What most people are not familiar with, because it generally isn't taught, is where Tammany Hall came from, okay? Tammany Hall actually had its origins at the beginning of that century. It existed for quite a while before Boss Tweed was even a glint in his mother's eye. And where it came from was the fact that in the early days of this country, in New York City, particularly, which is where this formed, but it happened elsewhere, the Federalists had basically used corruption and their positions of wealth, basically the elite of the time were all Federalists, all right? And what they had done was they created a situation where it was impossible for people with an opposing viewpoint to participate in the process, okay? Corruption, the type of things that you hear accusations being made about today were happening all the way at the beginning of this country's inception and the very first political contest. Just the sleaziest things at voting stations, stealing of entire boxes of ballots, but also more legal sort of things, passing laws, because this is what they were able to do, that would make it impossible for people that didn't agree with the Federalist agenda to even show up and exercise their right to vote. You needed a certain amount of money. You needed this, you needed that, whatever. Tammany Hall arose as a response to that. And yes, it was a violent response in many ways, and yes, it was a criminal response in many ways. But what it did was it secured the ability for Democrats in New York City to participate in the process. And the Democrats of those days were not the Democrats of today. We're talking, basically Jeffersonian, Jacksonian Democrats who thought that the government should be small. They had already compromised once with the Constitution. And that's what that was. It was a compromise. These people wanted the Articles of Confederation.
As the Constitution?
Yeah. Well, it came first. The Constitution came afterwards. And the basic reason is that the money men couldn't make the old document work for them. So they kicked and stamped and made sure that early republic would fail, so that they had to go back to the drawing board. And the Constitution was the compromise. It created a stronger federal authority, but with a lot more protections. They didn't want to go any further. Okay, this was the compromise. But as can be expected, we talked earlier about not treating with liars and not treating with people that show they can't be trusted. It was never intended by the Federalists, later Whigs, later Republicans, later Democrats, to be a final state of affairs. It was a stalling measure, and they were going to begin basically the day after in trying to increase the federal power and increase their power. And this is what they've done for the last 300 years.
What? Oh, damn.
It's wild.
I need to read more about early history, because then you start making connections, and you start to see patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll send you a link to some good books. And more importantly than just being good books,
they're not good books by people with wacky ideas and if this and this and this, then maybe this.
Right.
I have some books by some sober historians who are anything but rebels, who paint this picture and show you what the country was like in these early days. You don't need to be conspiratorial minded to understand these things and accept them.
Interesting. I would honestly love a book list. I'll reach out to you on my personal Twitter and get the list. That'd be awesome.
Cool.
I am curious, are you going to vote in this upcoming election? And if so, for who?
I've never voted in my life.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yep. I you know what else I haven't done? I haven't played shell games either. When I see them in the street parade, I just walk by. I don't need to do that. If you get my drift. So
yeah.
I'm not gonna play. And I understand all the arguments against that. I understand people, with their, well, you have to vote against what's worse. You go do that. That's fine. I'm not going to stop you. I choose not to participate in such a tainted process. At the end of the day, whatever does come after this, if it's anything, nobody's going to be able to lay it at my feet and say that I consented to any of it, because I don't.
I just saw a really interesting study that just proves that government literally does nothing for us. If an issue has above 70% popularity with the whole country, there's a 20% chance that it will be passed into law. If an issue has 20% popularity with the country, there's a 40 or 50% chance that it would, like something ridiculous like this, that basically proves that our representatives have never and are not listening or putting into law anything that the public actually wants. So I totally get the sentiment of saying fuck it. So in terms of the upcoming election, is there a candidate that you feel would be better for the country in the next 4 years, or do you think they're both sort of fucked?
Just that's a loaded question. One of the things that we were looking to do with John's campaign was to demonstrate that there is no president such as you or I might imagine.
Okay.
What you have is essentially just a figurehead. And in fact, if you go back to the beginning of Trump's presidency, it was about 2 weeks in where you can see a distinct change in the man. And
really?
I would challenge you to go watch interviews and everything else with him before and after, and you'll see it's subtle, but it's distinct. He changed. And then you add that to the fact that many of the things he said he was going to do, he did not do.
He didn't. Wow.
And we're used to that with politicians, but in the case of Donald Trump, it was different. There was the expectation that he was from the outside and he wasn't, he wasn't going to play.
I thought he was going to release the Kennedy papers. He never did that. I was
just going to mention that. That's probably the most telling, even though it's also probably the least important out of all of them. But it was the most telling. If there's anything he should have done, it was that. And he cannot argue that it was not within his authority to do so.
I wonder why. That's crazy. That's crazy.
You wonder why? Just take a look at his family tree. Okay. He's got a host of beautiful children with futures. The man's children and grandchildren, I meant to say, right? The man's not stupid, and he's not the heartless monster that people would like to make him out to be. He's a human being, and you may not like some of the things he says, but he's a fucking human being. And I'm sorry, but when an agency sits down and says, you can go against us, but you're going to be compromising the future of your children and grandchildren, like specifically in a very serious way, like they'll be killed. You do what you're told to do. Most people.
Is that what you think the assassination was? Do you think it was a lone wolf, or do you think there's something deeper there?
The whole story's weird.
It is
weird.
Damn. Yeah, that's so weird. And it's always a lone wolf with no help.
Everything we're being shown has the mise-en-scene feel of theater. It doesn't even feel real when you're looking at it in real time. So, how do you begin to evaluate these things? Certainly, their story doesn't make any sense. But this has been going on for a very long time, where they give us stories that don't make sense, and we accept them. Jeffrey Epstein, the Las Vegas shooter, and people talk about these things, and there's a problem, because when one person is left being the only one talking about it, or two people, or 10 out of a million, and they keep talking about it, then another phenomenon kicks in, and people start to say, you sound like a broken record. And, oh, when are you going to come off it? And so what you find is you can't even allow time to unveil these things, because people will soon turn against the people trying to do it and be like, oh, you're just obsessed. You must have a motive. So they know that all they have to do is to have some time pass. And that's all, that's all. You can move on to the next thing. So we have no good answers about the Vegas shooter. We have no good answers about extra gunshots that are heard. We have no good answers about 9/11 and all the things that didn't make sense. And I'm farthest from the person who's going to stand there and say that I know. I don't fucking know what happened. I was not there. I wasn't far from there, but I wasn't there. Okay. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen the evidence because they won't put it in front of me. And if you're going to expect me to believe a cockamamie story just because you gave it to me, you're mistaken. I'm not going to do that. Not having the answer is sufficient for me to say, yeah, I don't believe what you're saying. I don't have to have the answer to not believe you.
Right. To know that
most of these things, my answer is I don't know, but I know that what you said is not it. There's no way that's it. The world is that way.
That's what I think. One of the benefits of the internet is it's harder and harder to cover shit up. I mean, it's cracking open. People are really digging in to all of these events. And
what are they digging into? What are they?
Bullshit half the time. Into. Yeah,
I see. Yeah. Right.
They're going to uncover. I mean, one of the oldest tricks is to bury evidence, right, that you fabricated and let somebody find it. That's a very old trick, to the point where it always amazes me when I encounter people who do such things and think that they're clever. I mean, God, people have been doing this since we were in caves. Like, you're not clever.
Interesting.
And people fall for it because it's an easy way for human beings to be blindsided. We don't see all that other shit.
And it causes division too. I mean,
these are old problems. They're just being magnified by our technology and the instantaneous nature of our society, the ubiquitousness of everything. We've given people, just right off the bat, a problem. Even if everything we saw was real, we've still, I would submit, given them too much to think about. And if you go back 100 years, you had more things to think about than somebody 200 years ago, who had more things to think about than somebody 300 years ago. Well, we've reached a point now where the number of things we ask people to think about is just insane. And to the point where, when somebody says something and, my first question is, well, did you put any thought into that? I almost have to know the answer before, because they've commented on so many things that there's no they couldn't define the time. I mean, you have to shit and eat and do all these other things, right? So when did you think about it? I'm curious, because I can't seem to see how you could have a thoughtful opinion on all the things you have now discussed in the space of 20 minutes.
People have lost the ability to critically think in the first place now. So that's why I'm just going to buy a cabin and move into the woods, maybe get some goats.
That used
to settle down.
An answer. I mean, history's littered with people who said, fuck it. The problem is now there's a dearth of places to go where there's not some form of reach. And they can get to you however they want to get to you. And by they, I mean everybody, just the collective mass of humanity. I don't know what the answer is. But the new Star Wars, I know a lot of the new stuff gets criticized. People don't like certain things, and that's fine. But I think some of it's good, and I like that universe. So I watch it. But the new Ahsoka series had a villain named Baylan Skoll. And he's not like any of the other villains in the canon. In fact, the guy playing this character actually died at the end of the season, which is sad. So he won't be able to continue being in any ones that they make now. But he was arguing with the guy who was making the show, because he didn't look at his character as a bad guy. All right. And the reason why was this Baylan Skoll had just, his theme was inevitability, and they didn't say much about what he thought about things, but what they hinted at is that he was looking at the cycle, the Jedi, the Sith, the good, the bad, the back, the forth, and the fact that the one thing that you could count on was that it never ended. And there was hints that he was going to try and end it all by finding the source of this, force, I guess, so to speak, and perhaps destroying that.
Interesting.
See, while we may say that we don't want to come to the same place that he arrived at, certainly it is hard, and this is probably why the actor said he didn't view him as a villain. It's hard not to understand his thinking and to have some sympathy with that. You look at the human story, and so many of the things that we see and take exception to do seem to be inevitable. It's just you will come to this, and it's simply a matter of when. It's not a matter of heading it off or avoiding it or stopping it, or it's just wait, because you're going to get there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It sucks.
It does suck. It's the duality of life, I guess. But
in the other, it's the human story, and it's all we have. I certainly would not like to fix it by ending humanity. And don't take that for granted, because there's people who see that as the answer. They believe we cause so many problems that we shouldn't exist.
The anti-humanists.
Yeah, I despise those people with every fiber of my being. I don't care if I'm imperfect. I don't care if I'm fucked up. I don't care if anything else. I'm a human being. So guess whose side I'm on? And I mean, that's against fucking anything else. Any other entity that's going to come in and say, you're not doing good enough, I'd fucking blow them out of the water and say, how about that? I mean,
I agree. I agree 100%.
Rob, we do have my grandmother's 88th birthday in a little bit, so we're going out to dinner. But before, I just wanted to see if you had any last.
Celebrate 80 fucking years. She must hate.
Yeah, I have I saw her birth certificate, so I don't think she's lying, but you never know. But yeah, any last words or where people can kind of be on the lookout for your next article on the AI?
I hate that. That's always chilling when people ask me that. I've been on a few shows and people said any last words, and I say, well, what the fuck does that mean? Any last words? I hope any continuing words? Do you have any words to continue until we have you back on? Hopefully, it's sooner than 4 years. The one thing that you can really look for me, I would send everybody to LogeonFire.com. When I get it together, I do write things and I throw them up there. I recently did an interview with Fox Nation. It remains to be seen whether
awesome.
Use it, but they're doing a documentary on John.
Nice. If that comes out, please send it to us. We'd love to watch. Yeah. It's
supposed to be sometime later this month. I don't know. Awesome. We'll see. And if I make the final cut, maybe it'll be good. But
if you could recommend one book to the audience right now, any book, what would it be? That's my last question.
If I could recommend one book, well, it has to be two. Both are actually pop books, so that should make it easier for people to find them accessible. The experts in the field don't really like them because they're pop books, but they lay things out in a way that people can understand. One is called Games People Play. It's by a Dr. Byrne, and it covers
Eric Byrne, right?
What's that?
Eric Byrne.
Eric Byrne, yeah, Dr. Eric Byrne. And then the other one is called The Adjusted American. Now that one's out of print, and it would be harder to find, but I believe that it can be found in used markets, on the internet.
Do you know who that's by? The Adjusted American?
Pardon?
Who wrote The Adjusted American? Do you know?
Man, I've recommended it a number of times, and I can never remember the guy's name. But
no worries.
There hasn't really been anything else, so there'll be no confusion. If you search it, you're going to find that book.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you. We're going to get both of those.
Yeah, Rob, thank you so much for your time. We hope you keep feeling better, and let's have you on sooner than another 3 years or however long.
We'd love to talk again.
No, I appreciate you guys. And listen, if you could see my inbox and see how many of these things I turned down,
we know.
You would feel pretty. I don't know how you'd feel, but you guys I'll show up for. But
we appreciate that.
I've turned down a lot of requests. So.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate the long friendship we've had. So thanks again, Rob.
We love talking to you. So.
Cool guys. Be well.
You too. Thanks, Rob. And that is another great episode. He is just so authentic to the core.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that guy.
He just knows.
He's smart. He's smart. He knows his shit real well. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to talk to him about AI more.
Let's get some listener questions and invite Rob back on.
And
hopefully
he just has he's just such a big picture thinker. Like with the election, he's like, fuck them both. It doesn't matter. I don't need like that. That makes sense to me because
he's like, why bother to vote? It's waste your fucking time. Yeah. All right, Rob, thank you again. And we'll go out with a song by Grand Daniel Pickle Walks called Ohio.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening.
Sorry if I talked too much.
Still on the mic with me.